Good day to all of you. I am Alexander Benz Rosal, and my topic is all about 1973 Constitutional Authoritarianism. 1973 Constitutional Authoritarianism. In 1965, Ferdinand E. Marcos was elected president, and in 1967, Philippine Congress passed a resolution calling for a constitutional convention to change the 1935 Constitution. Marcos won the re-election and in 1969, in a bid boosted by campaign overspending and use of government funds. Election of the delegates to the Constitutional Convention were held on 20th November 1970, and convention began formally on 1st of June 1971 with former President Carlos P. Garcia being elected as convention president. Unfortunately, he died and was succeeded by another former president, Diosdado Macapagal. Before the convention finished its work, martial law was declared. Marcos cited a growing communist insurgency as reason for the martial law, which was provided for in the 1935 Constitution. Some delegates of the ongoing Constitutional Convention were placed behind bars and others went into hiding or voluntarily exiled. With Marcos as dictator, the direction of the convention turned, with accounts that the president himself dictated some provisions of the Constitution, manipulating the documents to be able to hold onto power for as long as he could. On 29 November 1972, the convention approves its proposed constitution. The constitution was supposed to introduce a parliamentary-style government where legislative power was vested in a unicameral National Assembly with members being elected to a 6-year term. The president was to be elected as the symbolic and ceremonial head of the state chosen from the members of the National Assembly. The president would serve 6-year term and could be re-elected to an unlimited number of terms. Executive power was relegated to the Prime Minister, who was also the head of government and Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, who was also to be elected from the National Assembly. The Constitution was amended several times. In 1976, citizen assemblies once again decided to allow the Constitution of martial law as well as approve the amendments and interim Batasang Pambansa to substitute for the interim National Assembly, the President to also become the Prime Minister and continue to exercise legislative powers until martial law was lifted and authorized the President to legislate on his own on an emergency basis. An overwhelming majority would ratify further amendments succeedingly. In 1980, the retirement age of members of the judiciary was extended to 70 years. In 1981, the parliamentary system was formally modified to a French-style semi-presidential system where executive powers was restored to the president, who was once again to be directly elected. An executive committee was to be created composed of the Prime Minister and 14 others that serve as the President's cabinets, and some electoral reforms were instituted. In 1984, the Executive Committee was abolished and the position of the Vice President was restored. After all the amendments introduced, the 1973 Constitution was merely a way for the President to keep executive powers, abolish the Senate, and by any means never acted as a parliamentary system, instead functioned as an authoritarian presidential system, with all the real power concentrated in the hands of the President with the backing of the Constitution. The situation in the 1980s had been very turbulent. As Marcos amassed power, discontent has also been burgeoning. The tide turned swiftly when in August 1983, Benigno Aquino Jr., opposition leader and regarded as the most credible alternative to President Marcos, was assassinated while under military escort immediately after his return from exile in the United States. There was widespread suspicion that the orders to assassination Aquino came from the top levels of the government and the military. Under pressure from the United States of America, who used to support Marcos and his martial law, the Marcos family fled into his exile. His opponent in the snap election, Benigno Aquino Jr.'s wife, widow, Corazon Aquino, was installed as president on 25 February 1986. President Marcos issued Presidential Decree No. 73 setting the date of the plebiscite to ratify or reject the proposed constitution on 30th November 1973. This plebiscite was postponed later on since Marcos feared that the public might vote to reject the constitution. Instead of a plebiscite, citizens' assemblies were held from 10 to 15th of January 1973, where the citizens coming together and voting by hand decided on whether to ratify the Constitution, suspend the convening on the interim National Assembly, continue martial law, or replace moratorium on elections for a period of at least several years. The President, on 17 January 1973, issued proclamation announcing that the proposed Constitution has been ratified by an overwhelming vote of the members of the highly irregular Citizens' Assembly. This event caused the coming together of the non-violent opposition against the Marcos authoritarian regime. Marcos was then forced to hold elections a year nearly, and said elections were marred by a widespread fraud. Marcos declared himself winner despite international condemnation and nationwide protests. A small group of military rebels attempted to stage a coup but failed. However, this triggered what came to be known as the EDSA People Power Revolution of 1986 as people from all walks of life filled the streets.